Hi everyone, I'm Terry Modisette. I'm the Executive Director of the Centre for Legal Innovation at the College of Law. I'm delighted to welcome you to this session on RegTech compliance and competitive edge, and also equally delighted to acknowledge through Deborah Young, who's going to be our first presenter today, that we are offering this in collaboration with the RegTech Association. So a fabulous session, I hope, in fact, I'm sure. And a fabulous topic as well. We wanted to offer this topic particularly focused on the legal industry to bring into the conversation more fully, and we hope through this more effectively by expanding networks and understanding lawyers and the legal ecosystem into this whole area of RegTech. Deb's going to provide you with an overview of what RegTech is all about. And then, because we are focused predominantly on a legal audience, you're going to see a couple of really amazing demonstrations that are going to be offered to you from presenters on behalf of Gaydens and also presenters on behalf of Cal Clark. So really, really looking forward to that. So if I may, I'm just going to introduce the folks that you can see on screen at the moment, and they'll wave to you and say hello. Deborah Young, who is the CEO of the RegTech Association. Hi, Deborah, good to have you. I'd also like to introduce to you Liam Hennessy, who's a partner at Gaydens. Hi, Liam. And Stephen Dudley, who's the solutions specialist at Lawcadia, who will also be working with Liam in terms of their case study. Introduce you to Emma Peters, who's special counsel with Cal Clark. Hi, how are you, Emma? And Sam Flynn, who's the COO of Joseph. Emma and Sam will be working together, presenting that mini case study on behalf of Cal Clark. So, as I said, kicking us off with some foundational bits and pieces about what RegTech is all about, I'm now going to hand over to our collaboration partner, Deborah Young, the CEO of the RegTech Association. Thanks very much, Deborah. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Terry, and thanks as well to my fellow panelists and all of you here today. We quite deliberately put the term competitive edge in the title of today's session, and this was for a reason. I think it doesn't help us to get caught up in too many buzzwords, such as, there's GovTech and there's DefTech and there's legaltech and there's RegTech. But what I think is important is this point around competitive advantage, because I think if you are not currently employing RegTech technology for your own productivity and efficiency, and if you are not advising your clients in relation to the productivity and efficiency that can be gained through deployment of RegTech, then you may in fact be losing your competitive edge. So that's my call out to the lawyers in the room today. You should be equipping your people with the very best tech to manage their day-to-day workload. And then you should also be advising your clients on the world-leading solutions that are actually sitting all around us right here on our doorstep in Australia. We're the third largest RegTech hub in the world, centred right here in Australia. So I am going to do a bit of a presentation. First slide. This is where I like to start all my presentations. It's actually talking about people, and it's talking about trust. And as consumers, we all demand trust. And there is an assumption of trust in all of our dealings with all of our service providers, whether that be, a bank, is that a law firm, is that a telco vendor? There is the presumption of trust. But of course, we know that in all dealings, sometimes trust breaks down. And this is where we believe that RegTech has a really important role to play. It needs to underscore and enable this trust and help build it in as a standard. What RegTech can also bring us is productivity, efficiency, and the lowering of costs. And then to my earlier points, really bringing that safety and confidence in your interactions. And by coming today, I guess you're here to hear a little bit about RegTech, and also how our association has been helping stakeholders from regulators to regulated institutions businesses of all shapes and sizes how they can employ RegTech to get to these very things. I mentioned earlier, this is about giving real tools for people that can bring transparency and efficiency. My call out to you on this point is, if you are a law firm coming here today, we want to ensure that you understand at the conclusion of this session, and we're going to hear from some of my colleagues who are going to actually present some of the tools to you, that you have access to the best groundbreaking tools to surface risks, manage data, and help people make better business decisions. And that includes your clients more accurately and in real time. The tools that RegTech typically employs might use artificial intelligence or blockchain or natural language processing. And we would say that RegTech is reasonably technology agnostic. So we don't mind too much what technology it is using. It is more how it is helping to enable businesses. So in short, RegTech is short for regulatory technology, and it's the application of technologies to improve the way businesses manage regulation and compliance. And the surprising thing about RegTech, as it emerged, it was most oftenly aligned very closely with FinTech. In fact, it's a completely different thing from FinTech. In fact, the beauty of RegTech is that it can be applied to any regulated industry that you choose to think about or mention. So you could think about real estate or healthcare or education. So all of those industries can use and employ a RegTech technology. So I've just talked a little bit about RegTech is an enabler and an accelerator. We don't see RegTech as being a disruptor, in much the same way that FinTech, for example, might be a disruptor to financial services. We see RegTech purely as an enabler. Another unique characteristic about most RegTech founders is that they are usually ex-industry practitioners. And so what this means is that RegTech companies, by and large, will have been started by very, very experienced people with deep knowledge of the problems, because they've usually worked around the problems very closely. So they might be ex-lawyers, they could be ex-consultants, they could be ex-regulators, they could be ex-bankers. So they have a very deep understanding of the problems. And so this is one of the unique characteristics that I think is worth mentioning, in that there will be a maturity in what you are seeing. I've talked about it being agnostic and it being tech agnostic. You may also hear other forms of RegTech, and SupTech or SupTech might be one of those. And usually we hear SupTech when they're talking about it from a regulator's use case, but largely the technology is exactly the same as RegTech. It's just who the user is. The RegTech ecosystem, and I won't read everything out on this slide, but you can see there it is a very diverse ecosystem. And one of the most important stakeholders, I think, on that slide is actually the government. So government actually, right at the very top of the tree, are setting the requirement for RegTech right there. And I'm glad to say that over the last 12 months, there's been a lot of interest from government as they accept and adopt their role in being lawmakers and policymakers. They have accepted their role, and that in part is to help alleviate the burden that some of the regulation is creating for businesses and for citizens. So why is it critical for regulated entities? And many of you on the line today may have regulated entities as clients. Well, you can see some numbers on there that are pretty eye-watering. You know, the cost of compliance is increasing. The regulatory fines are absolutely eye-watering. But it's critical because it gives greater transparency for boards and management teams, gives superior outcomes for consumers or customers and shareholders, and helps everybody, build a more sustainable business. Now, this is an important point about the importance of a global language. So when we started out on this journey about 5 years ago, we didn't actually have a global language for RegTech, and we had no meaningful way of being able to categorize the entire RegTech universe. So we went to quite a lot of trouble to actually develop what we call the RegTech taxonomy. And the taxonomy goes deeper than this, but what you'll see on this slide is a sample of how we categorize. So we've got risks addressed, and you can see the list of those on the slide. And then what we've got is the functional role. In other words, what does it actually do? And then there's a bunch of other stuff which can be found on our website if you were interested. But having this global language is really, really important. So we begin to develop some common understandings and themes. And there'll be lots and lots of people putting out all kinds of different RegTech taxonomies. But for our members, we use this so that we've got a common understanding, and it's really, really important. How do we engage? Right at the very beginning, when we first established the association, one of the key stakeholder groups that we knew we had to engage with was the local financial services regulators in Australia. So we've done that. So regulators become really, really critical part of our work. And so this gives you some idea about how we've engaged both with the government and with regulators, and how we have brought them along on the journey. And we've also identified strategic partnerships with a number of other associations worldwide. And you can see the Nordics, Canada, US, and the Singapore are nominated there. And we also involve ourselves on a bunch of policy committees, etc. as well. And so this is how we kind of engage with what's happening there. And then we were able to kind of boil all that down and bring that to our members in a digestible fashion, if you like. What we have, my earlier point was that Australia is the third largest RegTech hub in the world. And you can see this slide is now 2 years old. But you can see the size of the market in the US and the UK, and Australia's running third there. Now, Australia is not a major global financial centre as the two bigger markets are there, but so we're certainly punching way above our weight. So I'd urge you, if you are looking for RegTech, look at the good folk on the line today, and in Australia first for your solution, instead of porting straight over to the US or the UK, because we've got lots of great stuff right here. There's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about, what we've seen across the industry over the last couple of years. I think when we first started, one of our first goals as an association was to set a time to value metrics. Now, how can you do that? What we wanted to actually measure was how long it was taking from when a vendor had a first conversation to actually a full deployment. And I can tell you that when we first started, 4.5 years ago, it was something like 2.5 years between when it started to when it ended. Since 2019, when we did the last piece of research, the time to value metrics is shortened by 23%. And this research was done late last year. And I would say, based on the appetite that I'm seeing around the place, that's probably even shortened even further. So RegTech is definitely happening. RegTech is definitely being deployed. And if you are not on this, in the words of Anna Bligh, who was speaking at a government event last week, you better get on the train quickly. I won't go through all of the things on this slide. What I've done here, and I'll probably leave this with you, I'll just pick out two things. This actually has two different viewpoints. So this takes a viewpoint from the RegTech vendors themselves, and then it takes a viewpoint from the RegTech buyers. Think from the buyer perspective, the strongest indication that things are moving there is that there is a much stronger potential for buyers to be buying rather than building, which is significant. And then I think on the sell side, if you like, procurement is still the greatest common challenge. And it's not just RegTech, it's any software vendor is getting through the procurement of a large and complex organization is soul destroying at best. And if any of you have ever been through it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So it remains the greatest challenge. But on the upside, for RegTech vendors, there's a lot more capital flowing into the industry. So if you're looking to fundraise, this is a great time to do it. I won't go over everything in this slide, but if you want to know more about our association and what we're committed to, you can see there on this slide, this is our 12-month roadmap. Things that you'll be able to see pretty clearly coming out from us very soon are ESG, and I'm sure many of those in the legal world know quite a lot about ESG, and we'll be doing a lot more in that space. We're currently creating a global data hub, which we're very, very excited about, and we're looking at expanding our footprint into financial services. And then along the bottom, you can see some of the other industry sectors that we're looking to pivot to. This is our current strategic plan. And last but not least, this is a list of all of our members. So the people on the outside of the circle are the RegTech vendors, and the people on the inside of the circle are the service providers or regulated institutions. Some of the innovative things that I've seen, just in closing, that I've seen happening over the last little while is, and it highlights the importance of being really, really integrated around problem statements. What is the problem you're trying to solve? And actually, if you're a regulated institution, or perhaps this is one of your clients, we should be encouraging them to get aligned around their problem statements as much as possible. Because what that's allowed is our organisation to curate RegTech around specific problem statements and being able to take that technology indoors. And so one of Australia's big four banks, in fact, did that with us last year. And it was a very, very rewarding experience because it brought everybody to the pointy end without all of the backwards and forwards and all of the meetings and things like that that would normally happen. So we're seeing this increased demand for bespoke in-house problem statement approaches, and having that, agreement around what your problem statements are and being really aligned. And that means across things like technology, security, procurement. So this is not just simply about risk and governance, it's all of those things. So everybody needs to be aligned so that you'll have the most successful approach. And you can check our website for our public programs that we run, which we call Safe Place programs. It's like sitting in your lounge chair and watching RegTech from afar, but you don't need to buy. Hopefully that gave you a little bit of an entree into RegTech, and I'll hand back to Terry to introduce the next speaker.
Thanks very much, Deborah. That was fabulous. Just while, because we're going to jump in now with the folks from Gaydon. So while they're kind of setting up, just a quick question to you. For folks that are here today and this is their first foray into RegTech, and because the definition of problem statement might be slightly different for a bunch of different people, could you just expand on that a little bit on what you mean by a problem statement? Because it seems to be quite central to some of what you were chatting about this then.
Yeah. So that's a really good point. So a problem statement might be that perhaps an organisation's got some issues with some regulatory reporting, and that would be a common theme. Either the data's not coming in accurately, or it's not being packaged, or it's all really difficult, and then it becomes onerous to report to the regulators. So really crystallising what is the actual problem as it relates to regulatory reporting, getting everybody aligned that is the actual problem before you go out shopping for a RegTech solution. You really need to deeply understand the problem. And so that's what I'm really asking, organisations and businesses to focus on. What is actually, the problem before they go out to try and engage a RegTech and then get a mismatch there because it's actually not addressing the real problem that they've got. Yeah. And often the problems are actually about people more than systems, to be honest.
Yeah, and good to know that up front as well, no doubt, right? Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you for that. We want to go from Deb kind of laying that fantastic foundation to looking at a couple of examples, as I said at the beginning. So we're going to jump in with Gaydon's in association with Lawcadia, and I think Liam's going to take us through just a little bit of background on that, and then we're going to see a demo as well. So just handing over now to Liam and to Stephen to look at Breach Manager from Gaydon's.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks, Deb. And also thanks, Emma, and thanks, Sam. So I'll go through relatively quickly, conscious of everyone's time. The Gaydon's Breach Manager is designed for financial services institutions around a particular problem that we, as a law firm with banking and finance in our DNA, identified a couple of years ago. That is the pressure placed on banks, super, insurer to mandatorily report regulatory issues. The Guidance Breach Manager essentially is a tech collaboration with Lawcadia that allows those institutions that I've just mentioned to be able to identify regulatory breaches, get advice on them, and report them through to the regulator in a fraction of the time that they would otherwise be able to do. This was something that our clients were having issues with prior to the Hayne Royal Commission, and it was exacerbated with legislation coming out of the Hayne Royal Commission. If you go to the next page there, Stephen. So in addition to being able, there's a number of Guidance Breach Manager clients on the screen there. In addition to being able to identify those breaches and then report them through to the regulator, and we'll get to why that is such a challenging task when we show you the system shortly. Our clients have also taken the system and been able to use them to say, look, where are pockets of risk in our business where these regulatory breaches are arising? Is this in some of our front-end sales team? Is this in some of our HR teams, for example? By giving that sort of analytics and that overview of their businesses, it then allows them to dedicate time and attention to reducing those numbers of breaches. Bearing in mind that regulatory breaches, whether it's in anti-money laundering, whether it's in financial services, license conditions, whether it's in privacy, can have some really massive ramifications for the business and for the individuals within the business. Okay, so conscious of our time, Steve, if we just jump into the Breach Manager tool, I will give a quick overview of that tool. And then Steve is going to very quickly cover off on two components of that tool in terms of the intake aspect. So I am either a legal or a compliance person sitting at one of the big banks, and I am suddenly given a potential issue to deal with. So we've had some misleading and deceptive conduct, or there's an allegation of misleading and deceptive conduct in a product disclosure statement. I would then jump into this platform hosted by Lawcadia, which is ISO certified, which is data protected, which is protected from a privilege perspective if there is a lawyer on the other side. And I'll see what looks like a BuzzFeed article. That BuzzFeed article, when you move past the initial general boxes, if you just go slowly, Steve, will cover your mandatory reporting obligations under both ASIC and ASIC Financial Services License and Credit License, the financial accountability regime, which will shortly be in play for the banks come the middle of this year and will be in play for the insurers and super come mid-2023, and is hugely significant for individuals. It covers money laundering and counter-terrorism financing. If you just drop down a bit more, Steve. It covers the notifiable data breach regime, which is not probably as much of a concern now as it will be in the future once the Privacy Act gets a whole lot of teeth. Critically, it covers the Prudential regimes for both RSC licensees, for ADIs, for general insurers. There's a huge amount of regulatory infrastructure in this system. It covers the design and distribution regime, and then a whole lot of industry regimes like COBCOP and GICOP. To give you a bit of a flavour, if you go back to the AFSL regime, Steve, say misleading and deceptive conduct. Now, under this regime, which commenced in October, and as Deb said, the requirement for anyone who holds an AFS licence or an ACL licence, which is about 10,000 businesses across Australia, is that you report, with some exceptions, any breach of a civil penalty or criminal penalty provision in Australia. Now, if I am that poor compliance person or legal person sitting within a bank and I have an issue to deal with, and my starting point is any civil penalty or criminal penalty in Australia, that is an exceptional amount of work for someone to start from scratch going through all of the legislation that Australia has, and it's not realistic, bluntly. What this system has baked into it is the output of over a year's worth of our lawyers' time in identifying, calibrating, and constantly refining based on the Treasury output all of the civil penalty procedures, all of the criminal penalty procedures that bank is most likely to have as deemed significant breaches. And what that looks like in practice is you can search based on issues. So our clients go through and click on these issues, or you can search based on acts. We'll do things the hard way and click on, say, the ASIC Act, which will then have a drop down. That drop down looks something like this. You then click on the subheadings and we'll pick consumer protection. The subheadings correspond to the legislation. There's too many civil penalty provisions in the legislation just to have it all as one drop-down box without some gradation. And now we're down right into the civil penalty procedures, any one of which, if clicked on and accurate, will result in an immediate report to the regulator. You can see misleading and deceptive conduct right at the top there, which will apply for a potentially defective PDS. Steve can also text search that box if he wants to find other ones, and he can find it there. You then move down from that position where you've identified your law in a matter of seconds, minutes, as opposed to getting out the ASIC Act, the Corps Act. We've inputted all of Australia's taxation legislation in this system, which was a fun way to send the Christmas holiday New Year's period. And once you've moved from that, you can then move into some free type boxes which correspond to the subjective provisions of the legislation, whereby the legislation says that, look, even if you haven't breached one of these exact sections, if the situation is bad enough, you still need to report it to us anyway. That wording is baked in here so that you don't need to, as the risk and compliance officer, go to the legislation or reg guides. Finally, and in the second last box, you attach all of the Excel documents, emails, PDFs, spreadsheets, whatever you need to do that may evidence that breach. You rinse and repeat across each one of the modules of this system until you get to the bottom, and then you have a choice as your risk and compliance officer. You can either send all of this information that you've trained in the system internally for someone on the second line to say, I agree, we need to report this to the regulator, or I disagree, we don't need to put this to the regulator, or depending on how, and you can select who in your team there, and you can focus on who you want to have access to this information, or if the matter is sufficiently time-consuming or novel, a lot of these breaches relate to individuals, which are challenging, you can send it to guidance for a fixed fee advice. In effect, the system then handles the complexity, the time pressure, the resourcing constraints that Deb alluded to, insofar as you can, in one system, across multiple regimes, very quickly identify whether you do have a report or you don't have a report, handle it internally free of charge, or send it to guidance for some backup if you're really in a pickle. The system, as Steve mentioned before, and before I hand over to him, has been very closely calibrated by myself, our chairman, Paul Spiro, Lionel Hogg, our head of corporate, and all of our major institutional clients. There are 23 of them on the platform, and they're deriving significant value from it. What's really pleasing for us to see as well is, in addition to this system here, which is designed for second line risk and compliance and legal, it has the real engine room here, is that some of our clients with Steve and his team are modifying the system to put it out to their frontline staff and make it even easier for them. And they're also extracting from the Power of Lawcadia's intelligence system extra reporting to make not only their job in terms of reactive situations much smoother, but in terms of proactively helping their businesses. And so, Steve, I think that's my cue to hand over to you for the breach intake tool and then some of the reporting aspects.
So what this is actually solving is, in order for the risk teams to receive any sort of potential issue that may or may not have to go to the regulator, they wanted to have an easy entry point to allow anyone in the business to submit a potential issue. And that's up to the risk team to ascertain whether it needs to go to the next stage. So this is something that we worked on, and this is all about, you know, changing the different kind of wording, specifically that, say, the financial advisors, you know, can easily submit something without filling out the Guidance Breach Manager. They just want to ask just a few questions about, you know, what type of record type was it? Was it a complaint or whether it was an incident? And what this sort of does, it just gives very high level information for the risk team to understand, is this something that we need to potentially escalate or look further into? And do we need to launch the Guidance Breach Manager and understand what piece of legislation that may be in breach of? So essentially what we've sort of configured specifically for this workflow is just understand, okay, what's the minimum that you want to capture in order for you to make a decision as to whether you take it further. So it's as simple as that, and all they do is hit submit, and that gets sent to the risk team to decide. So then what we then sort of worked out with this particular customer specifically is, okay, what happens after the breach occurred? You know, what sort of remedy has you know, has the team actually done? So what we did is we worked out a post-breach workflow, and effectively what that brought a 7-step process specifically for them, because there was a fair bit of, it's almost like an audit of what actually went on, and we just wanted to make it a step-by-step sort of process about, you know, where you know, what's next. Okay, capture this information. Okay, that's fantastic. As you can see, I've pre-filled all this out. But, you know, the next step is then about the case details. And it sort of keeps going on from there. And what that sort of does, it really just creates, you know, all the data points that they want to capture, where before it was, you know, just captured in an Excel spreadsheet and it wasn't reportable. And that kind of lends to what Liam was saying just towards the end of there. Every single data point, we've got this set, so it flows into our reporting tool. So you sort of capture all the, you know, all the data points that were very unique to that particular customer anyway. They wanted to really understand, you know, what sort of subject. Was it advice fees, which is the most common? What was it, best interest? Was it conflicts of interest? Whatever it was, they wanted to capture very specific information, so they reported to the board. They can have a lot more in-depth information about what the breaches are coming through the system for the business. And by sort of going through this nice, easy process, that they are capturing a lot more of the issues, which before were not being reported. But what it does mean is they're really starting to get in front of, you know, where they're at. So if the regulator came and knock on their door, they say, we've got this fantastic process in place. We know what's going on. Our advisor got this great portal to do it. And it really sort of solves that that problem that they're trying to solve.
Steve, I might get you, just if you wouldn't mind, just to wrap up. Liam's just gone on.
That's fine. So I think, you know, what again, to the point of what the Guidance Breach Manager was intended to do is to empower the risk teams the ability to understand what the potential breach is, what piece of legislation it may be in, and just seek assistance easily if they need the help. And, you know, the send to guidance is an easy way. They click the button, they submit it, and it's over to the guidance team to help them out. So yeah, so we're pretty proud of it. Great uptake, and people are loving it. So we're pretty stoked about that.
Huge amount of work. I've got a quick comment and a quick question. If I'm understanding this correctly, people can find it by going to the Gadens website. Is that right? So we land on the Gadens website and we can see it there.
That's right, and you can also Gadens Breach Manager as well.
Okay, so separate website, but we can also get to it via the Gadens website. That's right,
and okay. Locadia as well.
And if I'm also understanding you correctly, which is what I love about this, yeah. it's almost combining.
Very specific website.
very specific website. It's almost combining the ability for organisations to do a little bit of their own internal triaging, then go down to that first line of, you know, what do we need, how do we collect it together, and then the second line as well, all in one place. Is that a fair comment or observation?
That's exactly right. And because Lookate is a legal operations platform and a matter management system, what risk teams can do is, if they don't feel that they need the the help or guidance, or that it's not sure, they can triage that workflow to the internal legal team, in which case then legal privilege then commences. And then it may be up to then the legal team to then submit that to guidance, so that there's kind of that approval flow that kind of makes sense in this case.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, both of you, for that demo. Fantastic. And really, I think, drew out of Deborah's first presentation there a focus on the finance industry. And Deborah also mentioned ESG, and that's exactly where we're going now with Emma and Sam. You're going to showcase, and thank you in advance for that, this amazing ESG compliance platform that you've got in this ever expanding and exciting area. So over to you, Emma and Sam.
Thank you, Terry. Yes, we're excited to talk a bit about ESG today, and also the platform that we've developed as well. Another area that we'll be touching on is how we've integrated other technology solutions to this platform, including Joseph, which Sam will be talking about as well. So this is us. So Emma, I'm a special counsel at Cal Clark, and we do a lot in corporate compliance here. And then over to Sam.
Sure. Thanks, Emma, and thanks everyone for having us today. So I'm Sam Flynn. I'm COO and co-founder of Joseph. And my background is as a lawyer. So I actually worked in some highly regulated industries, including energy, for about 3 years. So I can certainly see how RegTech solutions like the ones we're talking about today could be a lot of help to a practicing lawyer.
So I guess a bit about the ESG Cap and Violence platform and how it came about. It all started a couple of years ago in response to the introduction of the Modern Slavery Act. So a couple of our clients came to us and said, we don't really understand this and how we actually practically meant to comply as well. So in conjunction with a few of our clients, we developed this solution to try and automate and I guess streamline, in particular, supply chain due diligence. But as we all know, this space of ESG is changing rapidly and expanding. So what started as a response to modern slavery legislation has broadened out to getting to know third parties connected to businesses in a lot more detail in that ESG banner, so environmental social governance banner, getting an understanding of where risk may lie in connect to third parties connected to a business. So looking into things like, what's some environmental risk, what governance policies and procedures do third parties have in place that are connected to a business. So I think the best way to get an understanding of it is to show it. So that's what we'll do. And we'll also show you how we've integrated Joseph as well. So as I mentioned, this is all about helping our clients have some visibility over entities that are connected to them and where risk may lie and vulnerabilities. So what we have here is a dashboard, an interactive dashboard. This is where our clients have access to. Typically, it's a lot of in-house legal counsel, procurement, and a few exec team members that would access this. And this is all summarizing third parties, and the different types of risk that third parties have. So completely interactive, you can click on this dashboard and drill down to where the risk may lie. And then what we have is profiles on third parties. So typically this is suppliers, where we gather a bit of information about them and then the type of risk that they have. So risk, as we know, is not static and can change over time. So we also track risk. We do that in a lot of different ways. So that's things like matrixing. We've also partnered up with a third party for their analytics software, whereby we can screen suppliers for any high level hits, whether that's an environmental contravention to a cybersecurity breach to use of slave labor, incredibly broad in that ESG banner. But then one of the features which our clients really lean on for this system is automating issuing questionnaires out to third parties, where they can gather a lot more detailed information about third parties, whether that's in the course of a business relationship or at the beginning of a relationship, so that you can determine, well, what does the risk look like of this third party that we might go into business with? This has certainly changed over time. So we have, clients now who we work with who do things like site audits over third-party suppliers. So we track site auditing, where risks are coming out of those site audits. If a third party is subcontracting, to have that supply chain visibility, tracking subcontractors, but also inbuilt as part of this is a contract management system. So we capture some basic details about a contract and have tied into that renewals, reminders, pretty much any information that they would like to capture the client. So it's completely interactive and very quite detailed as someone wants to make it. On the right-hand side, this is where we have our recommendations. So that will be if we've seen something come back, there's a risk, we review that and then write a recommendation to the client through here, obviously privileged, as to what the risk is and what they should or might consider doing next. A great feature is this ability that we have to have indicators. So this is where clients would like to issue out suppliers questionnaires, which we have automated this process, so the responses come straight back in. We have lots of different questions. The questions are completely bespoke for each client essentially, and then each question is scored. So we have a traffic light system. So a question might be, where do your raw materials come from? If they say North Korea, that would probably be a red flag. Which is a true story, by the way, why I mentioned that. It's amazing what you uncover through this process, and also the information that clients have obtained about third parties connected to them. Exactly like I said, not knowing that plastics or raw materials might be coming from really high risk geographic locations. We have crazy reporting functionality under this. I won't go into detail, but essentially it's all completely interactive. We set up reports based on whatever a client wants. Everything in the whole platform is reportable. So, and it's interactive. So if someone wants to know, here's I want to look at what this contract is with supplier, from their inbox, they can just click that and it takes them straight to the contract. Or I want to know in my procurement workflow if this supplier has completed a questionnaire. Once again, just tick on that supplier and up pops the supplier profile. I won't go on because I will go forever, but reporting is endless. The next thing we have is our governance hub. So this is really hitting the G in governance and assisting businesses having, I guess, a central repository for here's policies and procedures, but also registers. So as Liam mentioned before, whistleblowing is definitely an area that's a lot of attention being put on at the moment. So we have hotlines connected into this, both from a supplier and employee perspective. We have cyber breach registers, and then bribery and corruption perspective, we have gifts and hospitality benefit registers. So once again, this is all very different for each client depending on what they're after. But what the next thing we're touching on is the integration of Joseph. So when we started on this journey, we were doing things like issuing to third parties or suppliers training, in particular modern slavery training. So it might be that one of our clients says, oh, this supplier, we want to go into business with them, but we don't think they're very strong in this area and we want them to get some more information. Can we issue out a training? So at the beginning, we started issuing via the platform, essentially like a PowerPoint, which has some background around here's the here's what modern slavery is and here's what you should know about it, we weren't getting a lot of engagement. So that's where Joseph came in. So we made this bot, which Sam will talk a bit more about, which we then issued via the platform to suppliers to complete. So completely interactive. We phrase it as almost like a question and answer. Here's a bit about the legislation. Here's what you need to know. And then here's the types of things you should be doing. We then started to get some really great analytics and insights. So we could see who's actually done the training, and also because of the yes/no function with questions, the types of things people were actually getting wrong as well. But we actually had even suppliers say that training was really great, thank you, which you don't hear very often. So I'm going to hand over to Sam to give a bit more information about the bot, but essentially that is what we did with it, which we issued to suppliers via the platform as well as employees. Cool.
Well, thanks, Emma. Always really, really exciting to see the platform and the tool that you built, and to Liam and Steve as well. So just really quickly before we wrap up for questions, I'll only take a few minutes, Terry. I'm from Joseph, which Emma mentioned. Joseph is what is called a legal automation platform. So we license it to firms like Cowell Clark, to in-house teams, to global firms, to sole practitioners, to allow them to automate parts of their day-to-day work. So the example we saw in Emma's team was modern slavery compliance training. And we saw all of the benefits that come from building a digital tool that provides that training rather than the old PowerPoint slides that we probably all sat through from time to time. So a really, really exciting application of the technology there. When Emma and I were planning for today's session, I suppose one of the things that we wanted to leave you all with was the idea or the feeling that you too can go out and build one of these tools or create some kind of digital tool that will help you, whether you're in-house, whether you're a law firm, do regulatory work, do legal work in this space. Joseph is what is called a no-code platform. So that's kind of a category of tech. I obviously think it's a very exciting category, but it really is growing. It's booming, not just in the legal and RegTech space, but across the world, across various industries. And the reason why it's so powerful is it gives us, probably not everyone on the call, but at least me, non-technical people, the ability to build and launch your own digital tools without having to know how to code. So we, as the subject matter experts, so Emma in this case in ESG, is able to build her own tool, or the Cowell Clark is able to build their own tool to do this kind of wonderful work that we've seen today. And I think that one of the really important parts of that is going back to Deborah's point from earlier in today's session. It allows us to identify those problems and work really closely with our clients, whether internal or whether at a law firm, to allow them to allow us to create real solutions to those problems as well. Just really quickly, I'm going to show you what that looks like. So this is the Joseph platform. Imagine you're a regulatory professional, a risk officer, a lawyer, etc., and you're logging into your organization's Joseph platform. Once you do that, you're going to get access to the suite of tools that you have created. There's lots here, but the one I wanted to focus on today was a whistleblowing bot. A few people have brought that up today. Whistleblowing is an area where we see a lot of work in RegTech and in tools built on Joseph. Other ones are in modern slavery, as we saw, ESG, anti-money laundering as well. If we look at the actual tool that's been built here, if I click preview, this bot is going to help us do various things, various pieces of work that we might want to do in the whistleblowing space. So we might want more information about whistleblowing. We might want help making a decision. So do I have reportable information? Or we might actually want to do the reporting and generate a document or an output as well. So there's lots of different work that we do in the compliance and RegTech space, and you can build out a great many of those on the Joseph platform. So here, for example, if we just want more information as a user, maybe I want to know about protections for whistleblowers, and then we start receiving that information. so on and so forth. We might also want help making a decision. And so here, we want to know if we have reportable information. We answer a series of questions, and the tool will help us come to a conclusion. So here it looks like we have reportable information. Lots more things you can do here. You can generate a report. You can send that report to someone else. But what I wanted to show you was what that looks like in the back end, because I think that's an important way to start conceptualizing how you would build one of these tools yourselves. So each one of these messages, it's just like a flowchart, like a decision tree, is one of the messages that we saw in the tool. This is the first message. If I wanted to change that, just type out here, and that would flow through to the tool. So truly no coding, you type it out and determine when it's going to appear, and that's when it appears. You'll see if I zoom out where different messages branch, and this is based on logic, just rules-based logic that we're all familiar with as regulatory practitioners or legal professionals, which determines when particular end users go to particular points in the flow. Lots more functionality there, obviously, but hopefully that's a good introduction to the way, what this looks like at the back end and how you too could start thinking about creating your own RegTech tools. With that, I will wrap up. We've only got a few minutes left for questions. Emma and me would love to hear from any of you if you have any questions or want to learn more about the ESG platform at Carroll Clark or Joseph more broadly. So please do reach out if you want to continue the conversation.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks so much, Emma and Sam. That's fantastic. If I may, I just wanted to kind of make a couple of quick observations. Firstly, I just want to congratulate you. This is an enormous amount of information in terms of both of the applications that you've shown here. And I guess the thing that, picking up on something that you said, Liam, that really struck me was just, you know, how, as compliance becomes more and more complex, it's going to become increasingly humanly impossible to be able to do all of this stuff in any way, shape or form manually. You've just got to have that tech solution. And that was brought home again, Emma, when you were going through your presentation. You know, you're looking at three very large, distinct areas, combined but distinct. And that was just kind of emphasized to me again there. And I guess as I was listening particularly to Steve and to Sam, the thing that I took away from that is that the tech is available. And I think Deborah really emphasized that as well. I was really blown away by how big, if you like, the industry already is. But it's available and it's accessible and it's doable. You know, they were the big things that I was really struck by and really heartened by, actually, in terms of the industry generally and the association. So I know we are just about out of time. Please do look at all the links that are there in the chat, but again, we'll throw those out for you. With that having been said, I also know that all of you are available on LinkedIn. Your products are available and accessible there, Facebook, Twitter, as well as the websites that we've already mentioned. And I also know that you are incredibly generous with your time. So I'm going to encourage people, again, to reach out to you if you kind of want to understand the journey as well as the products. I guess that's, you know, both of those are kind of quite important as we're looking at this being still relatively new in the legal industry. And of course, do please follow the Centre for Legal Innovation likewise on LinkedIn, Facebook or Twitter. We'd love to see you. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending today. Deborah, Liam, Emma, Steve, Sam, really appreciated your time today. And our first foray into this area, Deborah, also thank you so much to the RegTech Association for collaborating with us on this event as well.
Thank you, Terry.
And with that, folks, until next time, bye.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Terry. Bye,
Bye,
Tim.
everyone.
Thanks.
Yeah.